Imagine walking through London and suddenly seeing a 15-foot wave of beer rushing toward you, or watching hundreds of people dance in the street for days, even though nobody had played any music. History is filled with wars, disasters, and political scandals. But some events are so ridiculous that they sound like jokes invented for the internet. The strange part is that they actually happened. From a dead pope being placed on trial to an army being embarrassed by birds, these are 7 historical events that sound completely fake. Number 7. The Great Molasses Flood. On January 15, 1919, residents of Boston's North End heard a deep metallic rumble. Above the neighborhood stood a massive storage tank filled with more than 2 million gallons of molasses. The tank had leaked for years. Children reportedly collected the sweet liquid from the ground, while workers simply repainted the structure brown so the leaks were less visible. That afternoon, the metal walls suddenly tore apart. A dark wave of molasses surged through the streets, reaching roughly 25 feet high in some accounts and moving far faster than anyone expected. Buildings were crushed, train tracks were damaged, and people were thrown into the sticky liquid. Molasses sounds harmless because it moves slowly when poured from a bottle. But millions of gallons moving together behaved like a heavy wall. The colder air then made the liquid thicker, trapping victims and making rescue extremely difficult. Firefighters, police officers, sailors, and local residents struggled through streets that had become deep pools of brown syrup. 21 people died, and around 150 were injured. The company responsible initially suggested sabotage, but the investigation focused on the tank itself. It had been constructed quickly, repeatedly filled beyond safe limits, and had never received the careful engineering inspection a structure of that size required. The disaster later helped strengthen expectations for professional engineering and construction oversight. For years, people in the neighborhood claimed they could still smell molasses during warm weather. It sounds like a cartoon disaster. But for Boston, it became one of the deadliest industrial failures in the city's history. Number 6. The Dancing Plague of 1518. In July 1518, a woman later identified as Frau Trophäa stepped into a street in Strasbourg and began dancing. There was no celebration and apparently no music. She simply continued moving for hours. The next day, she began again. Within a week, dozens of people had joined her. Over the following weeks, contemporary accounts described a much larger crowd dancing uncontrollably through the city. Some collapsed from exhaustion before standing up and continuing. Strasbourg's leaders consulted physicians, who concluded that the dancers were suffering from overheated blood. Their solution was unbelievable. Instead of forcing everyone to rest, the city created spaces where they could dance more freely. Musicians were hired, stages were constructed, and professional dancers were brought in to encourage the movement. The authorities believed the condition would disappear once the victims danced it out of their bodies. The plan appeared to make the outbreak worse. Later, the city changed direction, banned music and dancing, and transported sufferers to a shrine associated with Saint Vitus. By September, the outbreak had ended. Exactly what happened remains debated. Ergot poisoning from contaminated grain is frequently mentioned, but many historians argue that its physical effects do not explain coordinated dancing lasting for days. Another possibility is mass psychogenic illness fueled by extreme stress, hunger, disease, and religious fear. The people of Strasbourg had endured terrible harvests and repeated outbreaks of illness. In that environment, one person's breakdown may have spread through a community that believed supernatural forces could control the body. Whatever the cause, the core event was recorded by the people who lived through it. For weeks, a European city genuinely treated non-stop dancing as a public health emergency. Number 5. The Cadaver Synod. In the year 897, Pope Stephen VI ordered one of his predecessors to appear in court. There was one obvious problem. Pope Formosus had been dead for months. That did not stop the trial. Formosus's decomposing body was removed from its grave, dressed in papal clothing, and placed on a throne inside a church. A church official was assigned to answer questions on behalf of the corpse. The dead pope was accused of violating church law and occupying the papacy illegally. The trial had little to do with discovering truth. Rome was trapped in a violent struggle between political families, rulers, and religious factions. Formosus had supported one side, while Stephen depended on another. Putting the corpse on trial allowed the new leadership to attack Formosus's reputation and cancel decisions he had made while alive. Unsurprisingly, the body was found guilty. The papal clothing was removed, and 3 fingers used for blessings were cut from the right hand. The corpse was buried in an ordinary grave, then reportedly exhumed again and thrown into the river Tiber. The spectacle horrified many people in Rome. Public anger turned against Stephen, and he was eventually imprisoned and killed. Later church leaders reversed the verdict and restored Formosus's status. The entire event became known as the Cadaver Synod. It sounds like a scene from a dark comedy about medieval politics. Instead, it was an official church proceeding where a dead man was dressed up, questioned, convicted, mutilated, and punished for crimes he could no longer answer. Number 4. The Great Emu War. In 1932, farmers in Western Australia faced an invasion. The attackers were not soldiers. They were thousands of emus. Large groups of the flightless birds moved into farming districts, searching for food and water, trampling crops and damaging fences. Many of the farmers were former soldiers, and they asked the government for military assistance. The government approved an operation led by Major G.P.W. Meredith. His small unit arrived with 2 Lewis machine guns and thousands of rounds of ammunition. On paper, the result seemed obvious. The soldiers had modern weapons. The emus had long legs and absolutely no understanding that they were supposed to lose. The first encounters went badly. The birds scattered into smaller groups, making them difficult targets. Machine guns jammed, rough ground disrupted attempts to fire from a moving truck, and the emus simply ran faster than the vehicle could follow. At one point, soldiers prepared an ambush near a dam where a large group had gathered. The gun jammed after only a small number of birds were hit, and the rest escaped. Newspapers mocked the operation and described the birds as if they were using military tactics. The soldiers eventually killed many emus, but the ammunition cost and poor results made the campaign look absurd. The military withdrew, returned briefly after farmers complained, and then withdrew again. The government later relied more heavily on fences and a bounty system. Australia did not literally declare war on a nation of birds, but it did send uniformed soldiers with machine guns into the countryside, and the operation became remembered as the Emu War because the emus proved much harder to defeat than anyone expected. Quick pause, if you're enjoying the video, leave a like and subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel and lets me keep making entertaining videos about strange history, bizarre science, psychology, mysteries, and unbelievable true stories. Now, back to the list. Number 3. The London Beer Flood. On October 17, 1814, an employee at the Horseshoe Brewery in London noticed that a heavy iron band had slipped from a giant wooden beer vat. The bands had moved before, so the problem did not appear urgent. About an hour later, the enormous container burst. The pressure destroyed nearby vessels and released hundreds of thousands of gallons of porter. The brewery's rear wall collapsed as a dark wave rushed into the crowded neighborhood of St. Giles. The surrounding streets were lined with fragile homes and basement rooms occupied by poor families. They had almost no warning. The flood smashed walls, filled cellars, and buried residents beneath beer, timber, and bricks. 8 people were killed, most of them women and children. Several victims had been attending a wake for a young child when the flood entered the building. The accident was investigated, but the deaths were ruled accidental, and the disaster was described as an act of God. The brewery was not required to compensate the victims' families. It even recovered taxes that had already been paid on the beer it lost, helping the company avoid bankruptcy. Later stories claimed crowds rushed into the street to drink the free beer, but some of those details are uncertain or exaggerated. The confirmed event is already strange enough. A damaged metal band triggered a chain reaction that sent a deadly wave of porter through central London. Number 2. The Erfurt Latrine Disaster. In 1184, King Henry VI called a meeting in the German city of Erfurt. 2 powerful nobles had been involved in a long dispute, and the king hoped to force them toward a settlement. Dozens of nobles, officials, and knights crowded into an upper room for the assembly. The old wooden floor was not designed to support that much weight. During the meeting, it suddenly collapsed. The people in the room fell through the floor below and into a large cesspit used as a medieval latrine. Some were killed by falling beams and debris. Others reportedly drowned or suffocated in the waste. Around 60 people may have died, including members of several important noble families. Henry survived because he was sitting in a stone section of the building rather than on the wooden floor that gave way. Rescuers had to pull survivors from a mixture of broken timber, injured bodies, and sewage. The original political disagreement was eventually settled, but the meeting became remembered for a completely different reason. An assembly of some of the most powerful people in the region had ended with the floor collapsing into the toilet beneath them. Even the name sounds invented for a joke. But historical chronicles describe what is now called the Erfurt Latrine Disaster. Number 1. The 38-Minute War. On August 27, 1896, the British Empire went to war with the Sultanate of Zanzibar. The conflict was over almost as soon as it began. After the death of Sultan Hamad bin Thuwaini, Khalid bin Bargash moved into the palace and declared himself the new ruler. Britain wanted a different candidate and argued that Khalid could not take power without British approval. British officials delivered an ultimatum ordering him to step down by 9 o'clock in the morning. Khalid refused. He gathered thousands of defenders around the palace, positioned artillery, and prepared the royal yacht in the harbor. British warships aimed their guns at the waterfront. When the deadline passed, the bombardment began. The palace was largely made from wood and was not built to survive modern naval artillery. Within minutes, fires spread through the complex, Zanzibar's artillery was destroyed, and the royal yacht was sunk. Khalid escaped to the German consulate while his forces lowered their flag. Depending on the source and the exact moment used, the war lasted roughly 38 to 45 minutes. Hundreds of Zanzibari defenders and civilians were killed or wounded, while only one British sailor was reported wounded. Britain installed its preferred sultan and strengthened its control over Zanzibar. The story is often presented as a funny historical record, but the enormous imbalance in weapons made it a brutal example of imperial power. Still, the central fact remains unbelievable. Two governments issued demands, prepared their forces, opened fire, ended a war, and began installing a new ruler in less time than many people spend watching a movie. These 7 events sound fake for completely different reasons. One city drowned in molasses. Another watched its residents dance uncontrollably. A dead pope was placed on trial. Soldiers struggled against emus. London was struck by a wave of beer. German nobles fell through a floor into a medieval latrine. And an entire war ended in under an hour. History often feels organized when it is reduced to dates and names in a textbook. But the people living through it experienced confusion, bad decisions, strange coincidences, and situations nobody would believe if they appeared in fiction. Which event sounded the most unbelievable to you? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe for more entertaining videos about strange history, bizarre science, psychology, mysteries, and unbelievable true stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.